First you draw a circle, then you dot the I's, put a great big smile, and presto, it's Kirby. Maybe I missed a few bars. But anyway, Kirby has a great reason to have a big smile on his face. This year, the real tough Cream Puff is having his 20th birthday, and what a duo of decades it has been. Ever since his monochromatic debut, Kirby has defined himself as one of Nintendo's most charming franchises, and certainly HAL Laboratory's most prolific character. Whether he was flying through the air, blowing up giant clock comets, or spinning himself into a yarn tank, Kirby has done it in style. Kirby came from the mind of Masahiro Sakurai, a young employee at HAL Laboratory. At age 19, he was tasked to create a Game Boy game which could be completed by players of any skill level. At first, he placed a blob-like character he named Popopo as a placeholder for the main character, but after a while, the development team grew fond of the rounded character, so the blob remained. Originally going to be named Twinkle Popo, the game was eventually renamed to Kirby's Dream Land before its release. As for his name, there are two theories. One relates to Kirby vacuum cleaners for the obvious reason, and the other relates to John Kirby, a lawyer who helped Nintendo win the pivotal lawsuit from Universal for the arcade game Donkey Kong. Regardless of how his name came to be, Kirby emerged in his debut title, Kirby's Dream Land, in 1992. The launch was not without a hitch, though. Because there was not enough communication between HAL and Nintendo of America, the US box art and commercials both featured Kirby as white, matching his appearance on the Game Boy display. His pink color would reside in every game thereafter. Kirby's Dream Land follows Kirby as he ventures to stop King Dedede, the self-proclaimed ruler of Dreamland, who has taken all the world's food for himself. However, Kirby has no real method of attack, save for one thing, his extreme appetite. Kirby inhales enemies into his maw and then shoots them out at others. This makes enemies their own weakness, and this is especially true with the game's multiple bosses, which includes a tree named Wispy Woods and a one-eyed storm cloud named Kracko. Even HAL's original mascot Lolo appears as a boss. Oh, for a new Lolo game. Anyway, besides just firing back enemies in certain attacks, Kirby can get two special moves from particular foods, mint leaves and spicy curry. The minty leaf bloats Kirby up with minty breath, which he shoots out at enemies, whereas the spicy curry turns the pink puffball into a fire-spewing monster. Even with so few power-ups, Kirby's Dream Land is very easy, as intended, but because of that, it's pretty short. Once the game is completed, however, players can access Extra Mode, where enemies are replaced, duplicated, and given one hellbent attitude to defeating Kirby. Even so, it should not be a surprise that Kirby's first adventure would be his simplest. Speaking of Kirby and adventures, after the success of Kirby's Dream Land, HAL went directly to develop its next iteration of Kirby, but this time it would be bigger and more ambitious, at the cost of its portability. Kirby's Adventure took the concept of Kirby's Dream Land and made it something much greater. In this adventure, Kirby and the rest of the inhabitants of Dreamland find they can no longer dream. Investigating, Kirby goes to the Fountain of Dreams, where dreams originate, to find that King Dedede has broken apart the fabled Star Rod and given the pieces to his cronies. No doubt Kirby has a problem with that, and his adventure begins. By far the most influential change to the gameplay itself was Kirby's notable palette of powers. Unlike Kirby's Dream Land, where swallowing was more time-consuming than anything, Kirby's Adventure gave the Pink Puff the ability to swallow enemies and copy their powers. These powers range from electrical attacks like beam and laser to more physical attacks like backdrop. While there are a number of power-ups Kirby can use until he just gives it up or gets hit, the game also provides Kirby with special limited-use weapons, including Mike and the explosive Crash. The new powers are not just for the offensive, too. Some powers can be used to solve puzzles and defend Kirby from attacks. This changed the pace for Kirby games forever. Suddenly, a player could venture through a level multiple ways, using the power they want to vanquish his or her foes. If anything, it made Kirby all the more badass for it. Rather than present the game in 5 short levels like its predecessor, the experience was expanded to fill 7 worlds, each with a multitude of stages and a map to explore. As Kirby completes each level, the next is open up in the map, and sometimes additional areas emerge too. These extra areas include a crane game to capture stuffed Kirbys, and a quick draw minigame to shoot down baddies. More important areas include museum and arena areas, allowing Kirby to retrieve powers at any given moment, provided the player unlocks them on the map. As the game progresses, some areas are not automatically clear, instead requiring Kirby to find large switches to press and unlock the areas there. Thankfully, the game tells you if you miss something, so at least it is fair in that regard. Furthermore, Kirby's Adventure brings back a number of bosses while also adding new characters to the mix. Wispy, Kracko, and Dedede return, but newcomers such as Paint Roller and Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright are just as formidable. I mean, look! You're fighting against the sun and the moon. Kirby sure is hardcore. However, the most significant addition to the game's character base is Meta Knight, a mysterious figure who works with King Dedede. Over the course of the game, Meta Knight helps you with power-ups, but also continually challenges you with his soldiers and eventually himself. Since Adventure, Meta Knight has become a staple to the Kirby franchise as much as Dedede has. In the end, Kirby's Adventure was a smashing success, garnering praise from critics and gamers everywhere. Upon its release in 1993, Kirby quickly became known to gamers worldwide, even more than in his initial release. Since its NES release, Adventure has been remade twice. The first was Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland, developed for the Game Boy Advance in 2002. A full graphical remake, the game chipifies the already overly cute game and updates the music and sound to make it more modern. The game adds a unique cooperative mode allowing up to 4 players to play the game together, and it even allows players to play as Meta Knight in Meta Nightmare mode. Outside of the complete remake, Kirby's Adventure has been remade for the Nintendo 3DS as a 3D Classics title. While it hasn't changed graphically, the game now displays in 3D, and the number of glitches and frame rate issues associated with the graphics are all fixed too. Needless to say, the game's multiple releases speaks volumes of how fans see it over the years. Despite the large amount of praise held by gamers for Kirby's Adventure, HAL Laboratory was not in good sorts. The company had recently built a new building in Japan, and combined with that debt, there was a continual loss of income due to poorly received games from its publishing ventures. In desperate need of help, HAL reached to Nintendo President Hiroshi Yamauchi for assistance. Yamauchi agreed to help fund HAL and help the company with publishing its titles, attaching the two together from then on as game development and publishing partners. With HAL now working directly with Nintendo, the company turned to Kirby on a multitude of side projects before moving him to the next iteration. First, HAL made the first spin-off game for Kirby, Kirby's Pinball Land. In Kirby's Pinball Land, Kirby chases after King Dedede into a giant pinball world based on Dreamland. Players get to guide Kirby through 3 highly vertical tables, all to face off against the game's 3 bosses, Wispy Woods, Kracko, and Poppy Bros Sr. Each segment of each table has a little puzzle of sorts, leading you to the next screen above, or leading to mini-games which can be used to rack up points. But while Kirby was enjoying a spin-off on Game Boy, he was only a couple of years from seeing himself in another spin-off, and on a new platform too. Kirby's Dream Course is Kirby's debut title onto the Super Nintendo. Released in 1995, Kirby's Dream Course was originally set to be a unique miniature golf game titled Special Tee Shot, but the game was changed into a Kirby-focused title in the middle of development. In order for Kirby to progress through this adventure, he has to defeat every enemy and subsequently fall into the hole at the end of each course. Using a number of guides, players set the trajectory, the curve, and the power of Kirby's next move. And just to give it a little Kirby twist, most of his trademark powers are available to him by hitting enemies on the field. Each stroke takes a hit point from him, and when he's out of hit points, he loses a life. The game comes complete with a single-player campaign and a completely different 2-player mode. In 2-player battles, 2 Kirbys face off against one another to collect the most stars, which appear by defeating enemies and getting into the hole. Kirbys can attack one another and cause general mischief in the game, and when one of the Kirbys loses his hit points, he has to sleep through the next round, giving more time for the other player to make his or her move for the win. Kirby's Dream Course would receive enough praise and sales to consider a sequel, but that venture's best explained later. Another Kirby spin-off, Kirby's Avalanche, was released in 1995, but it only released in the US and in Europe. The reason for that is very simple. It was not a real Kirby game. The game was originally the compile-developed Puyo Puyo series, which features characters and enemies from the compile RPG Mado Monogatari. While Nintendo released a variant outside of Japan focusing on Kirby, Sega did the same, but with a focus on the adventures of Sonic television series in the game Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. In the game, players have to stack light-colored Puyos next to one another so long as they are grouped into a single line. Once you have 4 or more together, they are eliminated. Getting combos sends garbage Puyos to the other side, and the first to fill the screen loses. But we're not here to talk about Puyo Puyo, we're here to talk about Kirby! Later in the same year, yet a third Kirby spin-off was released for the Game Boy. Kirby's Block Ball was a breakout clone that starred Kirby, and yet it was quite a bit more. In each of the game's worlds, players move star panels along their respective sides, keeping Kirby from hitting the spiky edges behind them. In order to progress, Kirby has to destroy every block on each screen, but unlike classic breakout clones, Kirby's Block Ball allows powered-up shots to launch Kirby all over the place, and power-ups and bonus events fill the experience continually. And it would not be a Kirby game without bosses, all of which try to attack both Kirby and the star panels. At the very least, it is a unique take on the genre. In the midst of all these spin-offs, Kirby would finally emerge in a brand new adventure for the Game Boy, and this time, he brought friends. Kirby's Dream Land 2, released in the US May 1995, takes Kirby on a journey to stop a new evil force, dark matter, which has possessed King Dedede and destroyed the great rainbow bridges which connected the land's many islands. Thankfully for Kirby, Dreamland 2 introduces one significant addition to the game, or should I say 3. Not only does Kirby have his standard power-stealing stomach, but he also has 3 new animal friends, Rick the hamster, Coo the owl, and Kine the ocean sunfish. Each ally has their own benefits. Rick does not slip on ice, and he runs faster. Coo flies quickly and allows inhaling in midair. And Kine allows Kirby to swim quickly and inhale underwater. Powers even change depending on which character you use, allowing for even more diversity than before, but at the cost of more specific powers. Knowing what each character can do with different powers is key in finding the rainbow drops throughout the game. These rainbow drops, one located in each world, are situated in hidden rooms, usually closed off by special blocks. These blocks can be destroyed by particular power helper combinations, which leads to some tense moments. Imagine trying to lug a sunfish over pits to get him to the next area and make way to the rainbow drop. Not the easiest thing in the world, let me tell you. In the end, though, to get to the final battle, every drop must be found, so keep at it! Some of you might be wondering where Masahiro Sakurai was this whole time. Well, he was behind both Kirby's Pinball Land and Kirby's Block Ball, but instead of Dreamland 2, he took his vision to a much greater scale. Kirby Super Star is a massive collection of multiple unique Kirby adventures, spanning from the classic Kirby formula to the most outlandish gameplay tweaks. Graphics have been given a boost, and each of the many powers have been given much more varied movesets, turning such powers as Beam into its own destructive force. Furthermore, this game introduces a new twist to the gameplay: cooperative play. Once Kirby gains a power, another player can join in as his helper character, allowing 2 players to experience Kirby together. Even alone, players can create helper characters to assist in puzzle solving and boss fights. This mechanic alone shifts the idea of Kirby from a solitary experience to a collaborative one, even if there are competitive moments in the midst. Playing alone or together, Kirby Super Star provides a collection of new Kirby experiences. Spring Breeze is the least unique of the bunch, as it is a simplified remake of the original Kirby's Dream Land. King Dedede steals the land's food and it is up to Kirby, and his helper, to get it back. Although it cuts a level and a boss from the original, it still provides a solid but short experience to those new to the Kirby universe. Following that is the Food Racer Gourmet Race. The shortest of the games, it pits Kirby and King Dedede against one another to the finish line, collecting as much food as they can along the way. After the 3 stages are run, the one with the most wins and food collected is the victor. Besides defeating King Dedede, players can also race for the fastest time in each of the race's time trial. Returning to the classic platform adventures, Dynablade pits Kirby against a new foe, the crop-destroying, giant metallic bird Dynablade. While it is structurally similar to Spring Breeze, there is now a world map to navigate, allowing players to replay levels and find unlockable pathways to power-filled areas. There are even wandering enemies which appear in the map, a la Super Mario Bros. 3. The gameplay only gets more intense with Revenge of Meta Knight. Meta Knight has had enough of the lazy occupants of Dreamland and wants to take over by force, but Kirby has a few words to say about that. During gameplay, players get to see the captains of the great ship Halberd comment about Kirby and the current situation, all while a doomsday timer rapidly counts down to 0. The game even gives you a visual as to the absolute mayhem a little pink puffball, and his helper, is having to the flying warship. It also has a great rendition of the original duel with Meta Knight. I mean, that song is so intense! Something is going down, and I'm not talking about my blood pressure. From intense action to mysterious exploration, the Great Cave Offensive provides a more puzzle and exploratory focus to the Kirby formula. After falling into a hole in the middle of his path, Kirby finds himself in a large cave filled with treasures and dangers. The goal is not just to find a way out of the cave, but to collect as much treasure as possible along the way. There are hidden treasure chests scattered throughout the land, and sometimes a little ingenuity can go a long way. The contents of each chest vary from nostalgia, to lore, to just plain odd. Either way, the game provides a unique challenge, especially when death brings you to the last save point, not the start of the room you were just in. Best be careful when being Indiana Kirby. Finally, the game offers a full open experience in its last game, Milky Way Wishes. The Sun and Moon are fighting, and a Dreamlander Marx tells Kirby the only way to stop them is to find the Great Comet Nova, and he needs to collect the star powers from each star nearby to summon it. Where Milky Way Wishes takes a turn for the absurd is that Kirby cannot copy abilities. Instead, he has to find unique copy pedestals among the many worlds to permanently have the ability to use the copy abilities. Also, the levels can be beaten in any order, making for complete control over your adventure. If that was not enough, the game ends with a shooting sequence. I thought I was playing Kirby, not Gradius! On top of the myriad of games, Kirby Super Star also has mini-games Megaton Punch and Samurai Kirby for quick multiplayer play, and there's an arena made to face off against all the bosses in succession. Hope you're prepared. Kirby Super Star has been seen as the pinnacle of the classic Kirby franchise, lauded as one of the best games for the Super Nintendo. Much like Kirby's Adventure, the game has been remade for more modern platforms. On the Nintendo DS, HAL created Kirby Super Star Ultra, a recreation of the original Super Nintendo favorite, but it also added new mini-games and 3 new larger games to play. In Revenge of the King, players play a much more difficult and fuller Spring Breeze, complete with the return of Kabooma from the original Kirby's Dream Land. In Helper to Hero, players control a single helper character through the arena alone. In Meta Nightmare Ultra, Meta Knight travels through each area of the game in Kirby Super Star using the touchscreen to use special moves in-game. And if that is not enough to add, there is a true arena to fight all of the new bosses, including a new final boss. What a way to enhance an already great collection. After Superstar, Kirby would again venture into a couple spin-off ventures before making a return to its more conservative platforming roots. In 1996, Nintendo released Kirby's Toy Box, the minigame collection exclusive to the Japan-only Nintendo Satellaview device. And in mid-1997, Nintendo and HAL released Kirby's Star Stacker, his second falling block puzzle game. At the same time, a new platformer was being developed, this time without Sakurai at the helm. But we'll leave that for the next part.